My ASIC miners put out an insane amount of heat, but I figured out a way to completely solve that issue for my at-home mining farm. And I only spent like $9 and it was all using stuff you could get at any local building supply store. And the system is completely passive, so no exhaust fans that use extra power or anything like that needed. And the crazy part is that it actually lowered both the noise volume and power consumption of my ASIC miners significantly. Yes, really, I'm not even kidding. Some of you might remember this video from last year where I did a similar solution for my GPU rigs, and this is basically that same concept again, but improved in almost every aspect to work even better. So in this video I'm going to show you the design, how it works and the advantages of it over a regular exhaust fan setup, and then I'll take you through a step-by-step guide on how I built it, and finally we'll look at the results before and after. And I hope that the main point I get across in this video is that ASIC mining at home is totally doable, and with the right setup it can be a real breeze. Pun intended. So let's get into all of that, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. Coin Mining Central is an online store for ASIC miners, and there's no doubt that right now ASIC mining is by far looking like the most profitable type of mining, and the miners that I'm personally most interested in right now would probably be the Bitmain L7 and E9 Pro, as well as the Jas-Miner X16Q. And what's cool about Coin Mining Central is that they always offer free worldwide express shipping, and I've always felt fully comfortable recommending them to you guys, and here's why. As opposed to most other ASIC vendors that are based overseas, Coin Mining Central is based and run out of England, Europe, where they have to adhere to the very strict regulations for customer support and personal detail protection that we have over here. And of course, all brand new miners come with a full manufacturer warranty as well. And because of this, Coin Mining Central has been a highly trusted ASIC miner store for miners like you and me for over 5 years at this point. They also care about this community, being very active and reachable on social media, and they've also provided loads of exclusive discount codes for you guys that you can use together with the link in the video description to save big on any miner that you want to get. And speaking of prices, I don't know if you've noticed, but ASIC prices have been dropping dramatically these past few months, so right now could be a very good time to stock up on some cheap hardware before the crypto market recovers, especially considering you get the already competitive pricing that Coin Mining Central has, plus the free worldwide shipping, plus the exclusive discount codes that I mentioned. So go check that out today. I'll have all of those discount codes and the exclusive link for you down in the video description. So I recently received a Bitmain E9 Pro and an L7 from Coin Mining Central for testing and review, but after running them for just about an hour or so, it became very obvious that you can't just have like 5,000 watts of ASIC miners running without some sort of cooling setup in place. But I also knew that I didn't want to have to spend a bunch of money on setting up a whole airflow system with exhaust fans or grow tents or stuff like that if I didn't have to. Basically, I wanted a simple but effective solution that would be easy to set up for any at-home miners like myself. So I wanted to see if I could copy my concept that I used for my GPU mining rigs last year, but this time optimized for ASIC miners and improved based on everything I learned from the last time I did it. And let me tell you, it worked out perfectly, and I'm like genuinely so thrilled with how well this turned out. So let me go through the design with you. Just like last time, I made a 3D model in SketchUp, which for me is just an easy way to make sure I get all of my measurements right and know all of the parts I need before I start a project. And as you can see here, the design is really super simple. It's just a styrofoam board that blocks a window with short styrofoam tunnels that the ASIC exhaust fans slide into. Those tunnels then lead the hot air out through the window, and the styrofoam board blocks that hot air from coming back into the room again. And if I just hide the ASIC's wall and window here, you can see that the design really is like super simple. It's just a styrofoam board cut to fit the window perfectly, and then for the size window I've got, it can fit up to 3 ASICs that just slot into these tunnels here. So that really is all there is to this design, and since it is pretty different from what people usually do, I thought I should go over the advantages of this setup that makes it optimal for me. So I'd say the most common way of running ASIC miners at home that I've seen is to set them up on a rack or shelving unit in the middle of a room and then install massive additional exhaust fans in the windows or air ducting to pull that hot air out of that room. And look, I'm not trying to demean anyone that has a setup like that, alright? Because Obviously, everyone's situation is different, and these are just the reasons why my setup works better for me personally, alright? Starting with the fact that no additional exhaust fans mean no additional noise and no additional power usage that you'd have to pay for. Secondly, with this setup you are funneling all the hot air directly out of the building, which means it won't heat the room up. Thirdly, the fact that the room doesn't heat up also has a secondary advantage, which is that the ASIC fans don't have to spin up as fast to cool the ASICs. And of course, the fact that the fans don't have to spin as fast means that they will last longer, they will pull less dust into the ASIC, they won't be as noisy, and finally it will actually significantly reduce the power consumption of the miners. More on that in just a bit, by the way. The fact that the fans don't have to run as fast to keep the ASICs cool also allows the fans more room to up-regulate if needed. Right now they only have to run at about 50% speed to keep the ASICs cool, meaning if we have an exceptionally hot day or something like that, the fans have plenty of room to spin up faster in order to account for that. And finally, of course, this whole cooling solution is also extremely cheap to build. You'd only have to spend about like $9 on styrofoam. But there's also a bit more to it, especially when I get into the main difference between this setup and the one I did last year for my GPU mining rigs. And that main difference is these tunnels that are new compared to the previous design that I made, and there are actually 3 reasons for why I went with this tunnel design instead of just having the ASICs slot directly into the styrofoam board without tunnels. The first reason for the tunnels is that the extra styrofoam will act to absorb a good portion of the noise produced by the ASICs, which I'm sure the neighbors appreciate. More on noise a bit later in the video, by the way. Secondly, the tunnels create just that little bit of space between the ASICs and the outside, so they won't be affected by rain or stuff like that. Although, to be fair, with the amount of air that these miners are pushing out through this window, it's not like there's going to be any chance for rain to make its way in anyway, as any rain that makes it close to the window will just be blown away. Lastly, the tunnels also give room for the exhaust coming out of the power supplies, which are on the sides of the ASICs here. If I had the setup without the tunnels, those exhausts would be kind of blocked by the styrofoam board, but this way they have room to push air out no problem. And for those of you wondering, the air coming out of the back of the power supplies is not really hot at all. I know, I checked. So having that air recirculate inside the room is not really going to cause any issues. Perhaps you could also argue that a 4th reason for the tunnels is to kind of help separate the ASICs from each other so that the exhaust from one ASIC won't heat up another one, but I can't say 100% that that really is valid since they are all connected directly to the window anyway. So next up, let me quickly walk you through how I built this setup, and then we'll look at the results before and after in terms of noise, heat, and power consumption. So the very first thing I did was not a very necessary step, but I got some of those like acoustic foam noise isolation panel things and I tied them to the inside of the window. This serves both to absorb and dampen a lot of the noise making its way to the window. So again, I think my neighbors are happy about that. But it also blocks the window so you can't see what's going on inside when looking in from the outside. And yeah, as you can see, I tied this up rather than using glue or anything like that, both because the heat from the ASICs might dissolve glue over time and make the panels fall off, and also because I want this whole setup to be completely non-destructive and reversible. So if I glue them up, that might leave nasty glue marks on the window, but with string, I can just simply untie them. Next, I put up chicken wire to block the window, as you can see here. This is just to keep any critters out and for ease of mind, really. After that, we locked the window and screwed it stuck at a level where it's just open enough for, a good amount of air to flow out, but not so open that it would attract thieves to try and get in. Basically, it's not open enough for anyone to be able to stick an arm through, and even if it was, the window is like completely screwed stuck where it is, and there's also chicken wire, so not really anything they could do anyway. Then it was just a case of measuring the inside of the window, cutting out a styrofoam board to fit in the window, and making the styrofoam tunnels for the ASIC miners. By the way, the ASIC fans are 12 by 12 centimeters. So if you want a tight fit, the opening of the tunnels should be 12 centimeters wide and 24 centimeters high. Because, you know, it's two fans on top of each other. Well, anyway, I glued the tunnels together using that same heat-resistant glue meant for use with styrofoam that I used in my previous heatbox video. But really, you could just do a couple of laps around each of the tunnels with any regular tape you've got lying around at home. It should work just as fine, honestly. And after the glue had dried, I just pushed the tunnels into the holes in the styrofoam board. No need for glue here, as it was definitely a tight fit. And then just push that whole thing into the window. I then put the ASICs on a little side table thing and just slid the exhaust fans just ever so slightly into the tunnels, just enough to kind of direct the airflow. Then I just plugged the ASICs in, and really that was all there is to it. So let's jump into the before and after results in terms of noise, heat and power consumption. And then I also want to touch on some limitations and disadvantages of this setup. So I put all the numbers in a tiny little spreadsheet for you here, and as you can see, kind of across the board a reduction on everything, which is great. Now, the before scenario here was having both miners in the exact same position on the little side table thing, but just with their exhaust pointing towards the open window. Basically the exact same setup, but just without any of the styrofoam. So let's have a look at the results here. And starting with the ASIC fan speeds, we can see that, yeah, drastic reduction here. Went from almost full speed down to basically half speed. But I'd say the biggest winner is probably the room temperature with an 18 degrees Celsius reduction, which I guess is like a 33-degree reduction in Fahrenheit. Noise was also another big winner, and measuring the sort of ambient room volume about 5 meters away from the ASICs, the reduction was 11 decibels, which is really significant. And one more thing that I want to note here too is that even though it's, you know, quote unquote only an 11 decibel reduction in noise, that reduction in fan speed does get rid of that really high-pitched whiny sound that these fans tend to produce at higher speeds, and kind of just leaves that much more tolerable kind of whooshy airflow sound. So while it's still not exactly quiet, the noise is a lot less annoying. Finally, the total power draw decreased by over 250 watts. And this will be partially due to the fans needing way less power to run at half speed as opposed to almost full speed, but also due to the fact that the ASICs overall are going to be a lot cooler, which means less resistance within the actual components, which means less power is needed to overcome that resistance. And finally, let's talk about the limitations and disadvantages of this setup, because, you know, it's not perfect. The first one is that you are kind of limited by what type of window or air ducting setup you have, because I guess you could do a very similar setup and connect that to a air duct instead of a window. But anyway, if you don't really have access to a window that you can screw stuck in an open position or something similar like that, or if you have a massive amount of ASICs and only like one small window, or, you know, anything along those lines, then this setup is not going to work. Other than that, the only other downside that I'm seeing to this is that, you know, it's still not fully silent, and while it did reduce the noise significantly, I'd say it's still too loud to run in a direct living space. Like, you can't have this running in a living room or bedroom. It'd have to be still, you know, in a basement, garage, attic, or something like that.